Washoe County Library System welcomes you to our monthly series from the Nevada Historical Society presents High Noon with Neal Cobb. This afternoon's topic is the Oral History Project for America250, presented by folklorist Brad McMullen. My name is Jennifer, and I'm happy to be here with you today. And now I would like to introduce Sherry Hayes Zorn, the Nevada Historical Society. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, John, who is our library technician with the Washoe County Libraries. Thank you so much for everybody today for being here, and I'm so happy to introduce our host, Neal Cobb, today, who is our honorary curator of history, and I'm looking forward to today's program. So without further ado, let me introduce Neal Cobb. Hey, Neal.
Thank you, Sherry. Our speaker today, Brad McMullen, joined the Nevada Arts Council as a folk life specialist and a state folklorist. And he did this in wait a minute, this is current. Hey, it's 2023. McMullen was the former programs and gathering manager at the Western Folklife Center in Elko, Nevada, where he oversaw the planning of the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering and other events. He arrived in Elko in July of 2018 after graduating from the University of Oregon with 2 master's degrees, one in public folklore and one in arts administration. He also has a master's degree in Welsh from Cardiff University. He is originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And on a personal side note, he is a very charismatic individual that really works that persona in with being a first-class professional. I had to work with him just a little bit, and it was a major delight, and I hope any and all of you have a chance to meet him personally. At this time, please welcome Brad McMullen.
Thank you, Neal, and Sherry and Jennifer and everyone for being here. Like Neal said, my name is Brad McMullen. I am the folklife specialist at the Nevada Arts Council, also known as the state folklorist. If you've never heard of that job title before, it is one that exists. And no, I am not giving it up so you can have it. That is a question I get asked. I'm here today. I'm going to talk to you about a project that I am working on in collaboration with the Nevada Historical Society, with the divisions of museum and history here in Nevada, called Our Nevada Stories. So, what is Our Nevada Stories? It is part of the state of Nevada's part of the America250 celebration. As you hopefully know, next year is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which means there's a lot of celebrations going on at the national level and at the state level. So, in addition to Our Nevada Stories, there is a Civic Seal program celebrating civics education, especially for youth and civic engagement. There is a volunteer program celebrating how Nevadans like to give back to their communities and the ways we engage with each other charitably. The Travel Nevada is doing a tourism program, doing funding for events related to America250 in the rural parts of the states. And the Nevada Arts Council is doing a project doing public art in communities around Nevada, pairing muralists with communities who want to have murals celebrating their heritage. And then there's the museums and me doing Our Nevada Stories. So what we are interested in is just collecting as many stories as we can from as many Nevadans as we can, because it's a way to not just look at where we are in this, 250th year of America, but also where we've been, how we've got there. I'm also interested in collecting what are people's hopes for the future, Where are they hoping Nevada, where are they hoping America will be 50 years from now, 25 years from now? I just want to collect as many stories and information as I can. And before anyone says, well, you're not talking about me, I don't have interesting stories. You do. The I mean, one part, a story doesn't matter what the content is. What's interesting is how you tell it. And I fully believe everyone can tell an interesting story. And sometimes that story is just about how you made your cereal that morning, but that doesn't mean it can't be interesting. And it also doesn't mean it can't be important. Because what are we going to do with these stories? These stories are going to be a living archive. The hope is that this is not just we're doing it this year to celebrate America250. The hope for the museums and I that this is an archive and repository of stories and information that's going to live on, that people will be able to go back and listen to, go back and keep contributing to. So that way, in 50 years, when we get to America 300, people can go back and hear the stories from America 250 and know, what was life like in 2025 and 2026. They know how we like to have our cereal because 50 years ago, that was very different and you had a lot less options. And I'm sure 50 years from now, it's also going to be very different. So the only way you know that is by having regular people, anyone, contribute their stories. And these stories are also going to go into museum exhibitions at the different state museums, as well as we're going to be making a podcast featuring these different stories that'll be airing on our NPR partners, as well as be available online and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll be talking about what I collected in all these interviews that I am doing because I am traveling around the state doing as many interviews as I can with as many individuals as I can. And, there's only one of me, there's 3.2 million of you. So I'll talk a little bit later about how you can get involved and help out. But I'm interested, like I said, in any kind of story. I want your family histories. I want local stories. How did, that building, what's the history of that building? What's the history of the local institution? Why did you come to Nevada if you're like me and a transplant and who just moved here and became a Nevadan, when you arrived and learned it's Nevada and not Nevada? Or if you're someone whose family's been here for generations or since time immemorial. I want those stories. And then I want your ghost stories. I want the story about the time you were driving near Area 51 and saw a UFO. I want your prank stories. I want your joke stories because those stories are the stuff of everyday life. And history books tend to talk about the big grand scale events, but there were all these little stories happening alongside those big events. And those little stories are, like I said, just as important and just as valuable. And without this kind of collection and documentation, they don't get saved. But I know when I go back and am reading history, reading the big history book is always so much fun. But I personally always enjoy things like someone's diary or a commonplace book where it's just, here is my offhand notes and observations about the weird things that happened to me today, because that's what gives you a sense of what life was actually like for everyone, not just these big grand events. And it's a reminder that big grand events have always been happening and people continued on with their lives. So that's what our Nevada Stories is, just trying to collect as many stories, big or small, personal, local, community history, and document those and share those with your fellow Nevadans, and not just now, but also your fellow future Nevadans, people who might not be here yet, but will be arriving any day now. So that's what it is. I've got a couple person interviews under my belt. Like Neal said, I got to sit down with him for, oh gosh, 2 to 3 hours. We were sitting there chatting. He opened up his home to me and interview people. I'm asking them how did you come to Nevada? How did your family come to Nevada? What does being a Nevadan mean to you? What interesting stories do you know? And so I'm going to share some samples from some of the interviews I've been doing. that I found really interesting, and hopefully that'll encourage anyone listening to want to add their stories to the mix. So, first up, I've got a section from Neal Cobb. I'm not going to introduce Neal because I assume you all know him. But him and I sat down, and one of the things when we were talking about how does someone become a Nevadan? Because I mean, I mentioned I'm a transplant. Once you know how to, my experience, once I knew it was Nevada and not Nevada, I was in. That allowed me to count myself as a Nevadan. And that's not necessarily the same for other states I've lived in. There was more to it to becoming a member of the state. And one of the things I love about Nevada is that openness, that ability to accept new people, and it shows. Nevada is the only state, I believe, where most people who live here weren't actually born here. We are a state of immigrants, and that is something that people have used over the years. And so when I was talking to Neal about that process of becoming a Nevadan, he shared with me a story from his time working at Harold's Club, the legendary casino there in Reno, talking about how they use that, Nevada's immigrant population, to encourage people to feel at home and come back. So, as someone who is a transplant to Nevada, it is remarkable how I don't think anywhere was quite as immediately welcoming as Nevada. Mm-hmm. Once you learn how to properly say the state name. Oh, of course. That is. But that was, the first week. I think the first time I said Nevada, I was very quickly corrected. It's Nevada. I'm like, got it. And remember when Guy Rocha corrected Bush, and when he came back the second time, he pronounced it right. He says, "See, I can learn too." but you gotta love that. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things, one of the things I find fascinating about Nevada is that it is, I can never remember the exact statistic when I actually read it, but it is something like 60% of Nevadans weren't born here. We're, one of the few states that it's majority immigrants, of people who have moved here. And so it's interesting to talk to the long-timers who grew up here, and then the recent arrivals, why they came, why they stayed, and everyone has their different experiences. When I was dealing crap down there at Harold's Club, he had Harold and Pappy and even Ray Monet. They had the comptroller come up and the other guy, and they had made note that they had visitors from every single solitary state and all territories. And so the right thing to do, but this is when I talked personally to Pappy. He was my first father-in-law. And he reached in his book and he pulls it out and he says, "A man's most prized possession is his identity." The way that these are done, the Harold's Club proudly presents Neal Cobb, Reno, Nevada. And that is an icebreaker. Who's my last name? Peak is from Montana. And guess where the people from Montana went? They spotted that name. They're over there, and it's Old Home Week on them. But that was a big deal with him to go ahead and make this a friendly club. That was his thing. But I asked him, why I had to have this thing on there. But to carry on about my take, my individual take, people would say, "Reno, Nevada." I says, "Where are you really from?" They had a hard time believing anybody was. So that goes way back as far as, the new people as opposed to the old guard. Yeah. So just one small snippet of Neal's and I's conversation, but that's kind of the thing that this project is all about. We all have an identity as a Nevadan, whether you were born here or arrive later, but it is a shared cultural identity. And as a folklorist, people hear that term and usually they think, well, you mean fairy tale, stuff like that, which is a part of what I do as a folklorist. But ultimately, folklore is about what do the stories, what do the art forms, what do the shared cultural expression that a group has say about it and its values? And so what do the stories Nevadans tell say about who Nevadans are as a group? Because it's a group we all have in common. We've all got plenty of identities. We're Nevadans. I'm a Las Vegan. You're all people listening might be Renoans. I think that's the right word. Carson City, Elkoans, all our different communities. They've also got their own cultures and traditions and customs and artistic practices specific to them. All our different ethnic groups, whether it's the Paiutes, the Basque, the Mexicans, Hawaiians. Renoites, thank you. That's one I always mix up on. All the different ethnic groups, but also occupational groups. My introduction, I spent 5 years in Elko doing the cowboy poetry gathering. Cowboys have their own artistic traditions. Cowboy poetry is a great example. But so do ski bums. All the ski bums in Tahoe have their own artistic traditions that make them who they are. All the different loggers, people who attend Burning Man, all these different cultural groups have their own things that mark them as a member. And being a Nevadan is no different. These stories that I'm collecting, that people are sharing, are the stories that mark us all as Nevadans. They're part of our shared cultural heritage as Nevadans. And that's part of why I'm so excited about this project as a chance to share and document those stories, because the Nevada story is the American story. We are intricately connected with what's happening outside of the state's borders, and we've played an important role. And part of that is how people moved around. You know, Neal was able to answer questions about what it was like growing up in Reno, and people not believing that, well, you could grow up in Reno and, oh, were you just raised on the casino floor, et cetera, all those jokes. And then it still is able to provide a sense of home to people wherever they're coming from. And whether you're someone who comes for a visit and then ends up staying, like I did, or if you're just someone passing through, there's people who can connect with you, whether it's the locals or someone who was born here or someone who became a local much later. And that's what's so exciting about this project, being able to collect all these stories. Another person I had the pleasure of interviewing was Karen Jenkins. Karen lives down in Carson City and has for many years, but she's wasn't born in Carson City. She was born in Pennsylvania. She moved out to Carson City after she graduated grad school and was the first full-time executive director of the Brewery Arts Center down there. She's had many jobs in between. She's a lawyer. She served in the Legislative Research Bureau, researching and helping to write legislation for Nevada's legislature, as well as was the head of the State Ethics Committee, using her legal training to help with defining ethical standards for elected officials and government employees here in the state. So just like with Neal, I sat down with Karen. It was about a 3-hour conversation talking about her life and history and what she loves about Nevada and everything. But one story she shared with me that really stood out was the time she had a ghost encounter in the Brewery Arts Center. So I'm going to share that with you now.
Experience. There's also people had told me that the Brewery Arts Center building was haunted. And I'm not really much about the woo-woo here. I'm not too concerned. And I was there a lot by myself. But I have to say that I did have an experience where, I was there a lot late at night. I'd throw my keys on my desk. I'd be doing paperwork or preparing a banking deposit, because we used to do that in a little bag with zipper with the lock and put it in the slot in the bank. They don't do that anymore. But I remember one particular night, I was making a deposit. I think we had had a performance at the community center, and I had the box office, and I was trying to reconcile it and get it into the bank. And I was finished and I was ready to go, and I could not locate my keys. I could not find my keys for anything, even though I always put them in this bowl on the corner of my desk when I came in. I was like searching my brain. I'm not one to lose my keys. And just like racking my brain. What? Where? How? When? Eventually, I found my keys. They were in a file drawer that I hadn't even been in. They were in the file drawer of my desk. How they got in there, I have no idea. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't sense anything. But whoever this ghost is that supposedly haunts that space has a heck of a sense of humor. And I was like, oh, come on. They must have fallen in there. I didn't have that file drawer open. And I always put my keys there, and I don't know particularly recall putting them there because it was an autonomic thing. I just always did it. But by gum, I could not find my keys. And I just scoured my office, and I got to open the drawer, and sure enough, there they were, just on top of the file folders, the hanging files. And I was just like, maybe there is a ghost here. I can't imagine it. And I had a colleague who lived at the Edwards house for some time, and would wake up in the night and hear piano music, because evidently there was a story about a ghost, a female ghost that would play the piano in the front bay window there, and there was still that piano there. So yeah, I don't really believe it, but I don't not either.
Ghost stories are a time-honored treasure in cultures around the world. But there is something very specific to them here in Nevada. We're known for our ghost towns. We're known for the history. And, sometimes people stick around. And we all in the present get those stories of their encounters. And they're such a fun genre to share with people. They're such a fun genre to listen to, particularly as someone who is very interested in the topic, but must have some kind of anti-ghost field. When I worked at the Western Folklife Center, plenty of my coworkers had ghostly encounters at the Pioneer Hotel in Elko. Nothing for me, even though I had many late nights there. The house I lived in Elko was actually the Old Town Morgue, and I know plenty of other people who had lived in it before me. They had plenty of ghost stories. Not a single one for me. I just had to deal with pipes freezing because it got too cold. And so I always appreciate hearing people's ghost stories because it's a fun story. It's something to share. It's something to swap. But they also, once again, capture interesting stuff about the time that you encountered it. Because here we have Karen talking about preparing the deposit and getting the bank statement and doing all that and what that process was like, which captures that moment in Carson City in the 80s, what she was doing for her work at a nonprofit performing arts center. That is also valuable historical information contained within this entertaining narrative about the ghostly encounter and how the ghost stole her keys and put it in a file cabinet she hadn't been in. It also talks about how we perceive historical buildings, the way we perceive the people who before, their legacy, not just in having built the building, but in remaining a part of it, of continuing to do the things that they love, playing music, playing pranks, and the way we visualize and talk about the past and how the past is still with us. That these stories, ghost stories are ultimately love stories, whatever Mike Flanagan reference you want to make. Those stories still capture something important about our history and how we perceive our history. So, I'm talking to people like, well, I don't know. I'm like, have you ever had a ghost story or heard one? I want to hear that because those stories are just as interesting and valuable as any other kind of story. Same with your other supernatural encounters. Same with UFO stories. They're just stories that say something about the time, about the people, about the culture, and ghosts, UFOs, all these things are such a big part of Nevada culture and the stories people tell about us. And so it's our chance to tell our own story and not be defined by others talking about the things that happen here. Another interview I did was with Keith Gibson. Keith was born and raised in McGill, Nevada, which I'm not going to blame anyone for not necessarily being familiar with McGill. It is just north of Ely, like 15 minutes north. It once was a thriving mining community. In the 80s, the EPA came and shut down the smelter that was located in McGill, which led to it being much reduced nowadays. But McGill, it started in the early 19th century as where the smelter was for the mines in Ruth, and then all the business people lived in Ely. And those three were a very tight-knit cluster of communities over in White Pine County. And McGill, like I said, it was a company town. You had to work for the Kennecott Mining Company to live there. Everyone had their jobs, and there were still also thriving businesses set up to cater to the miners and their families. And one of those was the McGill Drug Store. And it was built in the 1907, 1908 roundabouts there. And in 1929, the pharmacist who had been working there bought it out. And he and his wife ran it and owned it from 1929 until the pharmacist passed away in 1978. And the pharmacist, at which point the widow kind of donated the building and all its contents to White Pine County, who opened it up as a museum. And it's important to note the pharmacist and his wife never threw anything away. They have every single prescription filled out from 1929 until 1979. They've got every single invoice they paid. And if a product didn't sell or if a product got recalled, they just threw it in a box in the back. And here is Keith talking a little bit about some of the stuff, some of the pharmaceutical supplies he has found while going through the collection at the McGill Drugstore Museum.
Can you tell me about some of the interesting or some of the most interesting things you found when going through all those boxes?
Well, yeah, the one, Mrs. Winlow's soothing ointment for teething. She developed that as a patent medicine in 1845. It was mostly opium and drugs like that. You were supposed to use 2 drops and rub it on the kid's gums, but the people would give the kid a teaspoonful and the kid just went to sleep, never woke up. So it was called the baby killer. I think in 1911, the American Medical Association was formed and got the formula changed. Took most of that stuff out of it. And then in 1931, the Food and Drug Administration took it off the market. But I found 3 bottles of it. So these people, Jerry and Elsa, saved everything. If something didn't sell or was taken off the market, they put it in a box and put it back in one of these rooms. These rooms were just stacked with boxes. Records, we found every invoice from 1928 to 1980. We scanned them. There's 101,000 pages, which are going into the National Archives in Washington. We have every prescription from 1920 to 1980, about 400,000. The ones in the late 40s and early 50s, the downwinders can come in and look to try and find prescription to prove they were here. Then they could settle with the government if they have cancer. So we still do that. I think this is the last year, maybe one more. And other products, our most asked for thing here is Dippity Doo hair gel. Why? I don't know. That's a lot of young people ask for it, because I guess their grandma used it. The only thing I've never found here is Carter's little liver pills. I do get asked for Doan's pills. I had some people named Fitch that wanted to see something about Fitch hair tonic or something. So we found a bottle for that. Just people are interested in looking at this old stuff. I get a lot of doctors in here and pharmacists. They just go nuts in here. So I've had doctors from all over the world. Germany, Russia, whatever. And they admire the fact that we have it. We're the only one in the country probably that has the actual product.
Nevada has a wealth of stories just like this one, a wealth of objects and stories and information and histories that you can't find anywhere else. Like he said, this is a invaluable repository. It is a resource for downwinders. And if you're not familiar with downwinders, it's the communities in central southern Nevada, southern Utah, who were exposed to nuclear radiation from atomic testing in the 40s and the 50s. And as you might expect, that results in a series of lifelong medical problems. Cancer is the biggest one. And so the federal government does have, programs in place to provide financial assistance to those people to cover those medical issues that are a result of federal actions here in Nevada. And the way you can gain access to it is you have to prove you were in one of these communities at those times when they were doing the testing. Now, for the men who are working in the mines, they've got employment records that the mining companies have. It's pretty easy to be like, yep, I was stationed here in McGill, I was in Ely, I was in Ruth. Here's my, paychecks, here's my pay stubs, here are the records that prove that I was there. But it was a company town. People lived there with their wives, with their kids, with their family members. They weren't employed. And Keith was telling me about, especially early on, your husband dies on the job, you got to be out by the end of the week. And one of the mine superintendents came in and changed that, luckily, where if you were a woman with kids whose husband died on the job, you were allowed to stay until the kids graduated from high school before you had to move on and couldn't live in company housing anymore. But for all those people who weren't employed by the mines, they don't have that paperwork to prove they live there. But instead, they can go and I had the flu at one point and the doctor prescribed me some meds. I can go to the McGill Drugstore Museum and find the records of that prescription that prove I was here in McGill at that time. You can find all these records. And like he said, plenty of places have, a bottle of Mrs. Winslow's syrup, but they don't have the syrup itself. And that's what we've got over in McGill. Now, this is the reformulated version, not the original. That was just, here's some morphine and some cocaine, kid. Good luck. This one is a little less strong than that, but still not something you're going to see on the store shelves today. And it's a great way to capture that history. And by talking to other Nevadans, you all talking to your fellow Nevadans and documenting those conversations, it's a way to get that history that might otherwise be lost. That you never know what might be useful to help someone later. Those prescriptions at the time just felt like, little Timmy's got a cold. I need some meds to make him feel better. And now 60 years later, Tim, probably going by Tim now, Timothy, has cancer. And it's a result of something that happened back in the 60s. And he can go back and prove that he was there and get help with that condition. And it's because of this kind of work, of doing this kind of documentation, of keeping these kinds of records, that you can achieve those kinds of goals. My final interview snippet I've got for you today is from Glenn Terry. Glenn is a rancher near Ely, but he has been deeply involved in the Ely Renaissance Village. If you're not familiar with the Renaissance Village, it is a collection of old historic homes from Ely that they were rented out to the miners and their families during the height of Ely, that over years, got abandoned. But what people in Ely have done is collected objects and artifacts from all the different cultural groups that were present and decorated different houses, historic houses, like how they were decorated by those groups. So you've got an English house, you've got an Irish house, you've got a Basque house, you've got a Mexican house, you've got a Spanish house, you've got an Austrian house, you've got an Italian house, you've got a French house, documenting the different cultural groups that came through, because it was a mining town. You had people, just like the rest of Nevada, people from all over the world moving to Ely in order to make a better lives for themselves. Just the exact same way people come from around the world and around the US to Nevada today to make a better life for themselves. And the mines did have one fun idea about how to make sure people stayed out of trouble and had the things they need.
But they brought in, for the employees, boxcar loads of grapes. These were all wine drinkers. And I'll show you when we're through, because I got this all set up for one of the Italian families. We're making wine. Everybody got a certain allotment of grapes to make their own wine. And so the Italians and the Spanish and the Serbians, Croatians, all got a chance to make their own wine in their homes.
So in Ely, you had people from all around the world, all of whom had their own very specific taste in alcohol, specifically wine. And rather than trying to import a bunch of wine from around the world, the mining company, the Kennecott Mining Company executives decided, what's a lot easier? Let's just bring in grapes. Grapes travel a lot more easily, and if it's going for wine, we don't necessarily need them to arrive in the best shape. So it's easy to stick on the trains that are bringing out the ore and just bring in a bunch of grapes and distribute them all around town. So that way everyone could just have their own home brew making the wine. And that way the French could make wine like they wanted. The Italians could make wine like they wanted. The Spanish could make wine like they wanted. The Serbians, the Croatians, everyone could just have their wine how they wanted and make it at home. And so all these houses have these little trap doors for a little crawl space cellar beneath them where they had their wine making equipment. So that way everyone could make their own wine how they wanted to and share it. Because, yeah, you're making it for you, you're making it for your community, but it's a place where, yeah, you're mostly talking and working with people from your ethnic background, but that wasn't the case in the schools. That wasn't the case in the schoolyards. And all these kids were mixing and sharing their culture and sharing their traditions, which trickles up to the parents who start sharing their wine with each other and comparing notes on the best ways to use the wine. And this story and other stories I've collected like it show how communities come together. And there are these little snippets that this was news to me. I'd never heard about the mining companies bringing in grapes so people can make wine. But isn't it a great story? Isn't it fascinating? Can't you imagine? I mean, going back to Karen, there's probably a ghost in Ely somewhere still stomping on some grapes and making some wine because that's what they like to do. And that's what they're still doing nowadays. And isn't that fun? Isn't that neat? And how fun is that to share, not just for people in Ely, but for people in Ely to share with the rest of us throughout the state of Nevada and to share outward with people around the country and the world. These stories, like once again, help define us. You know, these are the stories that matter, the stories that talk about the things everyone is doing that we consider normal and commonplace that get taken for granted. These are the little things that make you smile. They're the little things you share with your siblings, with your cousins, with your grandparents, the things that make you happy in your heart. And oral history, our Nevada stories, the whole point is to capture those little moments, the things that make you happy that might not feel important, but when you look back 20 years from now, you realize were. And so, how do we collect these things? How can you contribute? Because, like I said, I am traveling around collecting as many stories as I can, but there's one of me, and there are over 3.2 million Nevadans. So I could use a little bit of help. One way is to share information about the people in your community who have interesting stories. I'll put up my email on the next slide. If there's someone in your community who think I should sit down for 2 to 3 hours and just chat with them and collect as many stories as possible, I love to do that. It's my favorite thing to do. I just get to sit and talk to interesting people and listen to them and learn from them. And it's great. If you ever have a chance to do it, I highly recommend it. And that's why I'm going to say you can also just interview yourself. You can interview your friends. You can interview your family members. You can interview your neighbors. Like I said, my favorite part of my job is getting to sit and talk to interesting people and listen to them. You can do that too. You might not be able to take my job title as state folklorist, but you can do the best part of my job. All you need is, your phone and a little bit of free time. And so, one of the things that's really nice about our Nevada stories is we're using a software called Their Story. And so if you go and search our Nevada stories, and I'll give you the link on the next page, we've got links on that site to pull up a little recording studio on your phone. It'll just open up. If you're on your phone, it'll open up right there. If you're on your computer, it'll just come right up and you just press the red button and you can record, and it can be you talking about your story, talking about some piece of community history. Tell me about your ghost stories. Once again, I would want to hear people's ghost stories. I want to hear all those stories. Or, it's hard interviewing yourself. I get it. I've tried and I am professionally trained to this and I still struggle with it. But a lot of times it can be a lot easier if you're sitting there talking to your neighbor. Say, it's holiday times. What's your family's customs? Do you have a particularly memorable Christmas experience or Hanukkah experience, Kwanzaa experience, New Year's Eve experience? I want to hear it. And you can sit down and just pull out your phone, click that button, and record it. And you can get, talking to your grandma about family history. You can document her story of why she moved here to Nevada, about why the time your grandpa and his brother pulled a prank on your great grandpa and the trouble they got into it. These kinds of stories are the things you're gonna want to know and your kids will want to know in the future. And you can collect them. The state is here to help with providing you access. Like I said, you can, just pull up your phone and do it yourself. But I would love it if you did it in our system, so I've got the record too, and it can become something to share. And if you want, I'm happy to, you'll record it. Once you hit done on the recording, it'll ask you to put in your email and, confirm that we are able to store this and use this. If you say in the video you want a copy of what you recorded, I will send it to you once it's in the system and I've listened to it. Your email's right there. I can send it right to you. So then you've got a copy too. And if that idea is exciting of interviewing your neighbors and recording them and not just a one-off thing, but if you or an organization you're involved with is interested in doing something bigger and more comprehensive, if you're with an organization that has a large base of volunteers or works with a large group of seniors and you want to collect their stories, get in touch with me. I am happy to do more dedicated trainings and information sessions about how to do this kind of work and why it's valuable, as well as set you up in their story, the system we're using, because rather than just clicking the link every time and getting that, I can set you up with back-end access. So that way you can have full ownership of the stories you're collecting and see them all and help do the process. And as someone who's been doing this kind of interviewing work for years, I've seen the technology evolve, and let me tell you, there is nothing more hellish than needing to listen to you talk and interview someone and all your ahs and ums as you transcribe yourself. And what's nice about their story is that you don't have to do that anymore. It automatically transcribes the whole experience. It will pull out themes, and it makes it very easy to listen to share, and you can generate the clips. All the little examples I pulled from that I played for you today, I just pulled in their story. I could just highlight on the transcript the section of conversation I wanted. It automatically did all the audio editing and video editing for me. I didn't have to sit there and remember how to use Audacity and how to use Premiere because I am very rusty at all of those things, and it's so much easier when you just have the computer to do it for you. So I want nothing more than to hear from as many Nevadans as I can to share their stories, to document their history, to document the history of all of us Nevadans. And I think this work is so valuable and so useful because it leaves the legacy, it leaves the record, and it's something people can keep going back to. And it's another way to document these stories and keep them going on for the next generation, because that's what culture is. It's the stories we tell each other and how we pass that on to the next generation. And they're going to make their own thing of it. They're going to do what they want. That is the role of the youth, is to innovate and to change. But elders in the community are just as valuable, and they demonstrate that value by sharing that knowledge. And what an honor it is to be able to document those stories, to keep getting shared and passed along generation to generation, as part of our Nevada Stories and the America250 celebration. Because like I said, when we reach America 300, it'll be a lot easier if we can go back and listen to what we recorded now and talk about how things changed in the past 50 years. So please get in touch with me. There is the link for our Nevada Stories as well as my email. I'd love to hear if you are interested in doing some interviewing yourself and want me to set you up in their story. If you want to chat about your stories, I am also happy to sit down with you, or if there's someone else in your community you think surely deserves an interview, please let me know. I would love to hear from them. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone's got. Thank you all so much.
Well, that was great, Brad. Everybody, if you've got some questions or have, please add them to the chat, and we'll visit with Brad. And Neal, I see you have a question.
Well, I've always got questions. Number one, have you had a chance to go to the Indian reservations and pick up information from, either the northern or southern tribes?
I haven't had a chance yet. I'm working on scheduling some in the new year, though.
how about programs to go ahead and generate contact and interest? Uh, I would really like to schedule you for God Club, and that's good old days. It's an acronym there because we're loaded with people my age. And there's lots of movers and shakers from yesteryear that are there. So we could talk about that. But I'll tell you what, I've learned a whole bunch, and I had been to that drugstore out there in McGill. That was something else, and what they have in the railroad business there, in Ely, unbelievable amount of, of railroad equipment, indoors and outdoors, and there's a gentleman, Mark, I forget his last name now, that's done different programs, and he is just really fun. He's as much fun to talk to as you. So, but I just am highly impressed with what you've been able to do, and I am grateful because Nevada is a wonderful, wonderful state. We're not only unique, but we have been important throughout the years. The support for World War II was absolutely beautiful around here. But it goes on and on and on. We have more color and more talent in this state. And I hate to say this, the entire state, including down in Vegas, they've got a great history too. Well, what was their, Indian Springs they started off as, I think? Yeah, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this program for High Noon. It's been outstanding. I just love it. So, Sherry, you better get me out of here. I think I'm done.
So, Brad, how many people have you interviewed at this point?
So I've gotten 8 in-person interviews under my belt. Been working to I've got a bunch more scheduled right after the new year. The holidays, I've been trying to schedule a bunch for this month, but holidays don't quite work well with that. But I've got 8 in-person, like 2 to 3 hour interviews done, and looking forward to a whole bunch more.
So I know I was on the committee, and we had a lot of people submit people and rankings. Have people actually started recording any of like short little stories on the website? Have they done that yet?
So unfortunately, my original plan was to kind of come up with a little themed prompt every month
Okay.
to share on social media. We've got a lot of people clicking on the link, but not so many people actually pulling through on the recording and submitting their story. So we're doing some refining there. I recorded it for this, a little video on how to record your story and reassurance, but then PowerPoint decided my video was not right and would not let me include it. So that will probably be going on live of a more detailed walkthrough on how to record your story. That should hopefully encourage people to start recording some more, as well as the encouragement. Don't record yourself, record your neighbor, because it is a lot more fun when you're with someone else, and it's a lot less intimidating when you got the camera on someone else and you're just asking questions.
I was going to say, and I think that's part of it. People are like, oh, I need to do it now kind of thing. And I think that can be overwhelming. So, yeah, I was just curious, what kind of engagement, you've been starting to get. There was a question, and what was the time period they were making wine in Ely? I don't know if I heard that either.
So it was early 20th century. That was the all those houses were they were originally railroad kind of waypoints and mining shacks that got relocated into Ely in like 1910, 1912. And so all the kind of the improvements, that little hatch, all dates, they were inhabited from about 1910-ish to about 1940. So that's when the winemaking was going on.
Okay. Well, as I say, there's even people that were making wine, Italians and different groups here in Reno, where they would have, back access to their root cellars and basements. And so I've seen that. So I just thought that was an interesting tidbit. Um, so can you explain a little bit more about what are the podcasts, you were talking about ultimately as you keep getting more information gathered, you're going to have, podcasts, episodes made. What's the idea to be able to share those like in little snippets or, um,
Yeah. So we're going to be the kind of the podcast final product. Like I said, it's going to be airing next year. So we'll be coming out with an episode a week between Memorial Day and the 4th of July. And it's going to be kind of thematic. Each episode will be a different theme. And I've got my running list of what I think those themes are going to be, based on the interviews I've done so far, but kind of each one featuring snippets from the different interviews I've done, talking about things like, the process of becoming a Nevadan and the state's, ranching history, gaming history, all these kinds of different facets of the Nevada story that come together to are part of our shared cultural history as Nevadans. And so it'll probably be like we're shooting probably for like a 40-minute-ish podcast that they'll then have kind of short little snippets that get aired on social media and during kind of NPR news updates, the kind of 1 to 3 minute little snippet that leaves you wanting more to go look it up and listen online.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I know that when we were in discussions, and so now, are you guys still be working with PBS or was it KUNR?
We're working with KUNR and KNL. I'm forgetting my own NPR station down here in Las Vegas, but we're working
I
with.
know. I was like,
Yes, and so they'll be, airing the short snippets and probably finding times to air the whole episode on their stations as well as part of it.
well, and it's a great partnership, of course, working with our public stations and trying to share this history of Nevada. Is there certain groups, time periods, or as you've been looking at the list and scheduling interviews, is there I don't know, weak points or areas you're hoping that maybe you can find some people to be able to interview to explore different topics?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm still scheduling some with the indigenous peoples here in Nevada. So I'm always looking for more there. And I could definitely, I'm a little also weak on the Basques. I've only got, I could use one or two more Basque people. Similarly, I got really good responses and I've had good interviews so far with people knowing kind of the mining history and some of the gaming history. I've got some scheduled. I've got some interviews scheduled when I'm up in Elko for the ranching history. But I mean, it's always nice to get some more to round that out.
Okay. So, and then because you are trying to gather little stories, is there a time periods you're kind of looking for, or is it just anybody that can share their stories?
Anybody and anything, and I think I guess one other group I would love more stories from is younger people. Because not only do they, I mean, younger people know family history, family stories just as much as their elders do. But I think young people, they've got a vision for what they want to see happen in Nevada. And I think collecting that story of what they want the story to be is just as important as what the story has been because it gives us something to look forward to. And it helps tell that narrative of, what is happening and what has happened and how that impacts the future and how it shapes the next generation of Nevadans. and getting their viewpoint on why they've stayed here and why they love Nevada and why they're engaged with it, I think is so important. And like I said, I mean, one of the interviews I'll be doing when I'm up in Elko for the gathering, it's a young woman, 24-year-old rancher. She is a cowgirl and loves ranching and being a cowgirl. And so I'm going to sit down with her and talk to her about what got her into cowgirling, being a cowboy, and what that life is like, especially for her as a young woman. What does that look like and why does she do it? Because she was telling me there's not a lot of young people doing it anymore, and it means a lot more work for her when there's not as many cowboys on the ranch anymore. So, hearing her share her passion is a way to help encourage other young people that no, this actually is, not just a cultural thing. This is actually still a viable job option. You can listen to, older cowboys talk about their careers and everything, but that's not going to convince you that this is still a thing you can do, like hearing from a young woman doing it. And so getting young people talking about their lives and their stories is a great way to show how these aren't just things in the past, these are things here in the present.
Absolutely, because you want them to be invested in the state and what they love about it as well, and in all aspects, and preserving the history, and people may not think it is history, but it is. And and you're right, we want younger generations to be excited about this and how they can help share what they're doing in their family's history, all of it. So I love it. This is great. And we're just so happy that you were able to do this for us, Brad. And I knew that with the 250 starting in January, that this was a great way that you could, just let people know what you've been doing and what you still plan to do moving forward on this project.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And I mean, like I said, always looking for more people to interview and looking to get more people also onboarded to help do the interviewing and everything. And I know Dan is working on ways to get the museums more involved and to give some trainings for museums and the Historical Society to get out there and be doing more documentation to build up for exhibits and just the archives.
No, absolutely. And also, maybe relooking at some of older recordings that we have that could be added as well to this I think is a wonderful option to get those stories out there. Neil,
It's
did you have a question?
Oh, I thought I covered everything pretty
Oh,
well.
okay.
I do believe that the computer corrected the my first name
Oh,
on the first slide. It's
oh,
Neal.
okay. Okay.
I have it happen all the time. Nobody really cares but me. So, but again, if I could be of any help one way or the other, I'd certainly like to. So uh,
Yeah.
keep
Yeah,
me in
absolutely. I
mind
think that would.
because yeah, this is something that's near and dear to my little black heart.
and I'm working on scheduling another trip up to Reno sometime soon. So I definitely want to come to the God meeting and get as many stories as I can.
Oh, well, do the same program that you got here would be absolutely ideal. And then they could leave the names and whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, I'll make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's it. And you're right. You're only one person, but how can we, as organizations, help spread, share the load, and get this out there so
You
other
know,
people can
so
witness.
oh, pardon me, Sherry. I didn't
Oh
mean to
no.
interrupt. But to do this kind of a program for both UNLV and up here in Reno at UNR, uh, there's where some of the younger kids that have stuck around here, that are born and raised here as Nevadans, or they've come to Nevada because they wanted, things that we offer that other states don't. Mining and things like this is still a big deal. So for whatever, but you'd be welcome many places. I guarantee you. So, am I right, Sherry?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. No, this is wonderful.
Okay. But so I am so thrilled with this program today. It was
Is there anything else you want to share, Brad, before we turn it back to Jennifer? And just thank you everybody for coming today and watching this program. And we hope that you'll be able to, maybe get excited to help share your stories or forward information on to Brad too. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, no, just please, like I said, everyone has, even if you don't think you have a story to share, you do. And it's also, part of the job of the interview is to help draw out that story. And once I had someone I interviewed compare it to a guided meditation, because it's your chance to just sit and think about your own life and your own experiences and verbalize things in a way you probably have never done before. I mean, it's not therapy. I'm not a therapist by any chance, but sometimes just the chance to sit and talk about, the things you've experienced and everything is actually just a really nice process for you as an individual. And I'm always happy to sit and talk and chat with people and listen to them and ask them fun questions about, like I said, I want to hear ghost stories. I'm going to keep going back to it, but please tell me your ghost stories. Go and click on the link and record yourself telling me a ghost story, because there's so much fun to listen to and so fun to share. And, up until modern marketing, December was the time for ghost stories. So we are in the right season for it. Honor your Dickensian heritage and record some Christmas ghost stories for me.
Well, thank you so much, Brad. And we'll send it back to you, Jennifer, and happy holidays.
Okay. Happy holidays to you. And thank you all for joining us. A big thank you to Brad McMullen, to Neal Cobb and Sherry Hayes-Zorn with the Nevada Historical Society, and to John, this month's Washoe County Library System Tech Support, for making this event possible today. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
bye.